Airports are already a battlefield when you're traveling with a 4-month-old. But nothing could have prepared us for the woman who nearly turned our entire flight into a war zone. It started the moment we stepped onto the plane. Me carrying our daughter in the soft carrier against my chest. Mike juggling the diaper bag and our jackets. Both of us exhausted but relieved because the hardest part was supposed to be over. We had the bulkhead seats, the confirmed infant bassinet, everything planned down to the minute. Then she appeared. A woman in a stiff navy blazer, hair sprayed into a helmet, and an expression like the entire world owed her a personal runway. She locked eyes on the empty bassinet hanging on the bulkhead wall like it had been handcrafted for her. Before we even had time to sit down, she marched toward us, heels clicking like a warning. "That bassinet," she announced loudly, pointing at the empty crib attached to the wall, "is for my designer tote. Your baby can sit on your lap like everyone else." I froze. For a second, I genuinely thought she was joking. But she stared at us with this sharp, entitled glare. The kind of look rich people give when they're used to winning arguments with money alone. The cabin went quiet around us. Even the couple behind us stopped arranging their suitcases. Mike took a slow breath. I felt my daughter shift against my chest. The woman placed one manicured hand over her chest and said dramatically, "I'm Penelope Harrington Wells. Diamond medallion, 2.4 million lifetime miles. I requested this bulkhead seating for my Louis Vuitton Keepall. It's vintage crocodile, far too valuable to be gate-checked." She didn't even glance at my daughter, not once. Her entire argument was that her crocodile purse deserved a government-approved infant bassinet more than an actual human infant. People around us quietly gasped. One man muttered, "You've got to be kidding me," while a teenage girl behind us raised her phone to start recording. Mike stayed calm, because he's always calm. But I could feel his arm tense beside me. "Ma'am," he said gently, "the bassinet is for infants only. It can't support the weight of a bag. There's a warning label right here." Penelope actually scoffed, like we were inconveniencing her by pointing out basic physics. "Well," she snapped, "they shouldn't hang it in first class where people with status expect accommodations." We weren't even in first class. We were in bulkhead economy. But she said it like we were trespassing on royal property. Our daughter suddenly stirred and let out a soft cry, tiny, tired, overwhelmed by the noise. I rocked her against my chest, feeling heat rise behind my eyes, because I was still hormonal, still exhausted, and still trying to hold myself together in front of an entire airplane of strangers. Penelope pulled out her phone and loudly declared, "I'm recording this. I will be posting it to the airline's Facebook page. Forcing a Diamond member to check a $38,000 bag because of a crying baby is discrimination." Cameras were definitely filming now. That's when the flight attendant, Maria, approached with a smile that said she was one more entitled comment away from quitting her job forever. But Penelope didn't let her speak. She shoved her boarding pass toward her and demanded, "Remove these people immediately. I need the bassinet." The plane fell absolutely silent. Maria inhaled slowly, like she was preparing for a long night. She looked at us with sympathy, then glanced at her tablet and whispered something to the gate agent. I thought we were about to be kicked off the flight. I thought our entire trip was about to fall apart. But instead, Maria stepped forward, met our eyes, and said quietly, "Mr. and Mrs. Chen, could you step aside just for a moment? We're going to take care of this." I didn't know it yet. But this was the moment everything shifted. The moment the crew decided who was right, who was wrong, and who was about to get the shock of her life. cabin felt like it was holding its breath as Maria gently guided us a few steps away from Penelope, who was still filming herself like she was the star of a reality show no one asked for. Passengers were whispering, phones were recording. My daughter was starting to fuss from all the tension. Maria leaned close to us, lowering her voice so only we could hear. "Don't worry," she said softly. "You're not in trouble. We're following procedure. Just stay calm for a moment." Her reassurance felt like a small warm light in a very dark tunnel. But behind her, Penelope was escalating. "This is outrageous," she shouted toward the front of the plane. "I paid for status. I deserve the bulkhead. I deserve the bassinet. This is unacceptable customer service." At the same time, she kept repositioning her crocodile bag on the floor like she was posing it for a photo shoot. She flicked her hair with every sentence, performing for her imaginary audience. Maria walked back to her. No smile this time, just calm authority. "Ma'am," she began, "the bassinet cannot be used for luggage. It is only for infants under 6 months old per federal safety regulations." Penelope crossed her arms, her chin lifted like she was preparing a monologue. "I don't care what your regulations are. I am the highest status passenger in this cabin. That alone gives me priority over any family with a baby. If that bassinet is hanging in front of my seat, then it belongs to me." A man in the second row muttered loudly, "No, that's not how anything works." Someone else snorted. A few passengers openly rolled their eyes. But Penelope didn't care. She slammed her designer bag onto the seat beside her and leaned forward aggressively. "I demand compensation," she continued. "Upgrades, vouchers. I will not tolerate being treated worse than a baby." She emphasized baby like it was toxic waste. My daughter whimpered again. I held her close, feeling her tiny fingers curl against my shirt, and something inside me hardened. I wasn't just tired anymore, I was angry. Angry that someone thought a purse deserved comfort more than my child. Meanwhile, Maria had seen enough. She stepped back and tapped her radio. Within seconds, 2 more crew members approached, including a supervisor with a tablet who looked like he handled situations like this weekly. "Ms. Harrington-Wells?" He addressed her formally. "I need to verify your ticket." "Finally," she snapped, holding her phone under her chin so the camera could still see her outrage. "Fix this, now." The supervisor scanned her pass. His eyebrows slowly lifted. "This seat," he said calmly, "is not assigned to you." Penelope blinked hard. Her mouth opened, then closed again. "Yes, it is," she insisted. "I booked it months ago." "No, ma'am," he replied, turning the tablet toward her. "Your seat is 14C. This is 8A, assigned to this family. Your reservation shows no special requests, no bassinet, no bulkhead assignment, and—" He paused, almost surprised. "You checked in late. These seats were never available to you." The entire row went silent. Penelope's face drained of color, then flushed bright red. She looked at the screen, then back at the camera, then at her fancy crocodile bag, like she was trying to compute where her universe had gone wrong. "That's not possible," she snapped. "I always get bulkhead. I'm a diamond." The supervisor cut her off politely but firmly. "Status does not override infant safety, and it does not allow misuse of safety equipment. You are required to move to your assigned seat." Her jaw dropped. Passengers quietly oohed. She pointed at us suddenly, desperate. "They don't even need the bassinet. The baby can sleep on them. The airline owes me—" "No, ma'am," the supervisor said, his voice crisp now. "You are not entitled to this equipment, nor to any passenger's assigned space. You must take your seat now, or security will assist you off the aircraft." A shockwave went through the cabin. People weren't whispering anymore. They were staring openly. Even my daughter was calmer than the woman causing the chaos. Penelope's hand trembled on her designer bag. "You're humiliating me," she hissed. "No, ma'am," Maria replied gently. "You did that yourself." Something in Penelope's expression cracked for the first time. Her posture sagged just slightly, like she didn't understand how the world had stopped bending to her will. But the situation wasn't over. Not even close. Because the supervisor glanced at us again and said the last thing any of us expected. "For your comfort and safety, we're relocating you." My heart stopped. Were we being downgraded? Were we being moved somewhere worse? Then he smiled. To an upgrade. And that is where everything truly turned. When the supervisor said the word upgrade, it felt like half the cabin froze. Even Penelope stopped mid-rant, her mouth open just enough to show she had no idea what she'd just heard. Mariah leaned in with a warm, apologetic smile. "You've been incredibly patient," she told us quietly. "And we know traveling with an infant is already exhausting, so we'd like to make things easier for you." My partner and I exchanged a stunned look. All we had done was stand there, holding our tired baby, dealing with a stranger's meltdown. It felt unreal that kindness was suddenly tilting back in our direction. Meanwhile, Penelope snapped out of her shock and pointed at us dramatically. "They get an upgrade?" she shrieked. "For what? For existing? For having a baby? I'm the highest status passenger here." Her voice pitched higher with every word until she sounded like she was about to break glass. The supervisor didn't flinch. "Ma'am, they did nothing wrong. You, however, delayed boarding, attempted to occupy a seat that wasn't yours, and misused safety equipment. That behavior affects everyone." A few people clapped under their breath. Someone whispered, "Finally," loud enough for others to hear. But Penelope wasn't done fighting. "You're rewarding them for getting in my way," she screamed. "That's discrimination. I'm being targeted because I expect proper service. I will sue this airline." She stabbed her finger in the air like she was pointing at invisible lawyers. Maria gently stepped between her and us, not aggressively, but with the kind of practiced firmness you only see from flight crew who've handled years of tantrums from grown adults. "Ma'am," she said calmly, "this conversation is finished." But Penelope was spiraling now. She grabbed her crocodile bag, clutched it to her chest like it was an emotional support animal, and started pacing in the tiny space, muttering to herself, "I'm a diamond. I'm a priority. They don't deserve more than me. I should be in first class. I always get the best." The meltdown was so intense that even my daughter stopped fussing and just watched her, wide-eyed, as if trying to understand what kind of creature she was witnessing. Meanwhile, the supervisor guided us a few steps toward the front. "We've arranged new seats," he said, far from any disruption. When he said disruption, he glanced over his shoulder at Penelope, who was still ranting in circles as though trapped in her own orbit. We packed up our things and followed the supervisor. The moment we turned away from our assigned row, a wave of relief washed over me, like stepping out of a storm and into shelter. But that relief was short-lived, because suddenly Penelope lunged forward, her voice cracking with desperation. "No, you can't move them. You can't upgrade them. That's my privilege. I earned it." She tried to shove past Maria, but Maria held up one hand, not touching her, just blocking her path with pure authority. "Ma'am, sit down immediately." Penelope's face twisted like she'd been personally betrayed by the universe. "You can't do this to me," she hissed. "I am entitled to better treatment than people like them." The words hung in the air like poison. The whole cabin reacted. A woman in the second row gasped. A man across the aisle muttered, "Wow." Someone started recording again. The supervisor turned fully toward Penelope now, his voice no longer polite. "Ma'am, that language is unacceptable. This is your final warning. If you cannot calm down and take your assigned seat, you will be removed from this flight." Penelope froze. For the first time since boarding, fear flickered across her face. She looked around and finally realized that no one, not a single passenger, was on her side. Not her imaginary social media followers, not her crocodile bag, not even the crew. It was just her and the consequences of her behavior. Slowly, shaking, she lowered herself into the seat she had tried so hard to steal. Her hair was a mess now, her face blotchy, her phone forgotten in her lap. She looked small, not powerful, not important, just small. Mariah gave us a reassuring nod. "Go ahead," she said softly. "Your new seats are ready." And as we walked forward, leaving the chaos behind, Penelope watched us go with an expression I couldn't fully read. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't entitlement. It was something closer to disbelief that the world had finally said no to her. But she had no idea what was coming next. Not yet. Because what happened after we took our new seats was the moment everything changed for the entire plane. The aisle felt strangely quiet as we followed the supervisor toward the front of the aircraft. It wasn't the normal hum of boarding anymore. It was something heavier, like the entire plane was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I could feel eyes on us. Not judging, not annoyed, but supportive. People gave small smiles. Some nodded as if saying, "Hang in there, you deserve this." Our baby, now awake again, was staring at the lights overhead, her tiny fists resting on my chest like she trusted the world again for a moment. As we reached the curtain that separated the first-class cabin from economy, Mariah stepped aside and pulled it open slowly. The soft lighting, wide seats, and quiet atmosphere felt unreal after the chaos behind us. "Here we are," she said gently. "You'll be much more comfortable here." She handed Mike the new boarding passes, and he read them under his breath. "Row 1, seats A and C." He looked at me, stunned. "These are the front. The very first row. The seats with real space. The ones with privacy screens, extra pillows, real blankets. And most importantly, room for the bassinet." As if on cue, another crew member came forward carrying 2 bassinet brackets. "We're installing both," he said. "You can pick whichever side works best." I didn't realize until that moment that I was shaking. Not from fear or stress anymore, but from relief so overwhelming it felt like my chest might burst. After everything, the yelling, the humiliation, the stress of traveling with a newborn, it felt like someone had finally put a protective hand over our little family. We sat down slowly. The seats felt impossibly wide. Our daughter looked delighted, her tiny eyebrows lifting in curiosity at the new space. A flight attendant offered us water, real glasses, warm towels, the whole first-class welcome. But before any of that reached us, the supervisor leaned down and said something I'll never forget. "You two handled that situation with more grace than most adults manage. We appreciate that. And your daughter deserves peace." I swallowed hard because my throat suddenly felt tight. "Thank you," I whispered, genuinely meaning it. But behind the curtain, a very different story was unfolding. Even from row 1 with the thicker doors and quieter atmosphere, we could still hear the faint sound of Penelope's voice rising again. Not screaming now, more like frantic arguing. Then came the supervisor's voice, louder, firmer. "Ma'am, your upgrade cannot be restored. Your behavior is the reason." Her response was muffled but unmistakably angry. A few seconds later, the curtain rustled violently, like she tried to push through but was blocked. "You let them have those seats," she shouted from the other side. "They're not even elite members. I paid for my status." The supervisor didn't bother lowering his voice this time. "Ma'am, you attempted to occupy a safety device that isn't yours, endangered equipment, disrupted boarding, and used derogatory language toward another passenger." There was silence for a moment. Then she screamed, "I want the captain!" At that, someone further back groaned loudly. Another voice said, "Just sit down, lady." Someone else called out, "We all heard what you said." A man near her added, "Just be grateful they didn't kick you off." The entire plane had turned on her, and she knew it. Her reply came out shaky and much weaker than before. I just want the seat I deserve." But the supervisor answered in a tone that ended all debate. "Mrs. Harrington Wells, the only thing you deserve at this moment is your assigned seat. And if you continue interfering with crew instructions, your trip will end here." Another long, tense silence. Then, finally, the sound of her sitting down, hard in defeat. Back in first class, Maria returned and gave us a soft smile. "She's settled," she said. "We'll keep an eye on her. You three are safe up here." Our baby let out a tiny squeak and then yawned, the kind of innocent sound that felt like the final word in this whole ridiculous drama. Mike reached over and took my hand. "Can you believe this?" he whispered. I shook my head slowly. "No," I said, "but I'm so glad we're up here, and far from her." He kissed the top of our daughter's head. "For her," he said softly. "Everything we do is for her." Our baby blinked up at us sleepily, completely unaware of the chaos her presence had accidentally revealed in a grown adult. And as the crew began preparing the cabin for takeoff, I finally let myself sink back into the seat, take a deep breath, and feel something I hadn't felt since boarding. Peace. Little did we know, this flight still had one more twist waiting, because Penelope wasn't done. Not yet. For the first time since we boarded, I felt my shoulders loosen. Our baby finally settled into the bassinet, her tiny chest rising and falling in soft little waves. The hum of the engines was soothing. The warm towel helped wash away the tension. First class felt like a different world, one where people whispered politely instead of throwing tantrums over handbag seating. But that illusion didn't last long, because as soon as the flight attendants started their safety demonstration, a familiar voice sliced through the cabin like a rusty blade. "I want a supervisor right now. This is unacceptable." The words shot through the curtain behind us. The entire first-class cabin went quiet. Even the flight attendant giving the safety demo paused for half a beat before continuing like a true professional. I leaned closer to Mike. "She's still going?" He sighed. "She's a hurricane with lipstick." Even up front, we could hear the whiny panic in her voice. The kind of tantrum thrown by someone who has never been told no in their entire adult life. "I paid for a premium experience," she screamed, "and they put me between two basic passengers in the middle row." Someone behind her snapped loudly, "Lady, we all paid. Just sit down." Another voice chimed in, "You bullied a baby for a purse." Then someone else said, You're lucky they didn't drag you off the plane." The murmurs grew louder, a wave of collective frustration swelling down the aisle. She had managed to turn the entire aircraft against her. Yet somehow, she still acted shocked that no one was on her side. Penelope gasped dramatically, like she'd been slapped. "I have never been spoken to like this. I'm a Diamond Medallion member. This is discrimination." From the cockpit, the captain's door opened, and a tall man in his late 50s stepped into view. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. Tired in the way someone gets after decades of dealing with people like her. He spoke in a calm, authoritative voice. "Ma'am, you need to stop this disruption immediately." There was a long silence. Then, unbelievably, she said, "Good, you can fix this. I want my first-class seat back. They stole it." The captain blinked slowly, processing that level of entitlement. Then he said something so perfectly calm, so professional, yet so devastating, that even the passengers around her gasped. "Ma'am, the passengers in row 1 are there because I approved the change. You are not entitled to those seats, and if this behavior continues, you will be removed from the flight." Gasps, whispers. A man clapped once before his wife elbowed him. Penelope sputtered. "You can't. I have a wedding to attend. My family is waiting. My bag." The captain cut her off. "Ma'am, you attempted to misuse safety equipment, harassed another family, delayed boarding, and are now interfering with crew instructions. One more outburst, and this flight will not depart with you on it." She let out a strangled noise somewhere between a sob and a growl. "I just want what I deserve," she whispered hoarsely. The captain exhaled slowly. "What you deserve, ma'am, is a safe and quiet flight, and you are responsible for making that possible." Then he turned and walked back into the cockpit, closing the door behind him with the soft finality of a judge ending a trial. The plane stayed silent for a long moment. And then, surprisingly, Penelope didn't say another word, not one. She sat down, hard, and pulled her crocodile bag into her lap like a lifeline. For once, she didn't fuss over her scarf or her hair or her status. She just stared straight ahead, stiff and frozen, like she finally realized she'd crossed a line she couldn't charm, bully, or threaten her way past. Meanwhile, in first class, the curtain opened and Maria peeked in. She gave us a tiny, conspiratorial smile. "Everything is under control," she whispered. "If you need anything, just press the call button." Then she leaned closer and added quietly, "And don't worry. She won't bother you again." Mike and I exchanged a look of disbelief mixed with relief, so deep it felt like an anchor finally dropping after hours at sea. Our baby stirred, then settled again, her small hand curling around the edge of her blanket. I kissed her forehead. "You're safe, sweetheart. No crocodile bag is stealing your bed today." Mike chuckled softly. "I still can't believe this is real." "Oh, it gets better," I said without thinking. Because I could feel it, the tension in the air, the way Penelope had been forced into silence, the humiliation she'd never expected. People like her don't stay quiet for long. Something told me this wasn't the end. And it wasn't. Because halfway through the flight, she made one last attempt, one final meltdown. At the moment that would have the entire cabin laughing, recording, and talking about it for the rest of their lives. For a while, everything was peaceful. The lights dimmed. The cabin settled into that soft, humming quiet that only happens on long flights. Our daughter slept in her bassinet, her little fists curled like flower buds. Mike finally leaned back, eyes closing for the first time that day. Even the passengers behind the curtain seemed calmer after the captain's warning. But people like Penelope Harrington Wells don't accept defeat. And even in silence, you could feel her stewing, like a pot left on a stove too long, boiling over in slow motion. Every few minutes, I'd hear her rustle aggressively, sigh with exaggerated misery, or mutter something under her breath. I tried to ignore it. Until the halfway point. That's when everything exploded. It started with the unmistakable sound of a plastic click, the overhead bin latch. Then another, and another. Someone behind the curtain hissed, "Ma'am, stop!" But she didn't. Penelope was opening every overhead bin in her row, yanking each one down so hard the hinges rattled. She was searching for something. Her bag. The crocodile bag, the one she refused to gate check, the one she nearly stole a baby bed for, was apparently no longer in her possession. Because she began shouting. "They took it. They stole my bag. That flight attendant sabotaged me. This is a federal crime." Her voice rose in pitch and volume until it pierced the entire plane. "I want the captain. I want security waiting when we land." Maria rushed over. You could see the patience draining from her face drop by drop. "Mrs. Harrington Wells, your bag was placed in the overhead compartment above your assigned seat. It is still there. I saw it myself." "No, it isn't," Penelope shrieked. "You moved me, you humiliated me, and now you've allowed someone to steal from me." Passengers were groaning, turning, glaring. Some filmed her openly now. They weren't even pretending anymore. Maria remained calm. "Please sit down. We cannot have this level of disruption during flight." "No." She stomped her foot like a furious child. "I demand you check every row, every bin, every compartment." Maria inhaled sharply, the kind of breath someone takes before deciding not to yell. "Mrs. Harrington Wells, your bag is not missing. It was heavy, and I personally placed it." "Exactly," Penelope screamed. "It's worth more than your annual salary." Gasps rippled through the cabin. Maria's face didn't change. If anything, she grew calmer, colder. "I see," she said slowly. "Then perhaps the captain should handle this." Penelope smirked, thinking she'd finally won. The curtain slid open. The captain emerged. He looked tired. But this time he wasn't just annoyed. He was done. "Ma'am," he said, voice like steel wrapped in velvet, "your bag is in the overhead bin exactly where it was placed. You watched the crew stow it. Then someone stole it. Search the passengers." He stared at her for a long, heavy moment. Then he said the words that sealed her fate. "No. What I am doing is diverting this flight to Denver to remove you from the aircraft." A hush fell across the entire cabin. Penelope's mouth dropped open. "You can't. I have rights. I'm a diamond medallion." "And I am the captain," he replied, "and you are a safety threat." She lunged toward him, not violently, but recklessly, like she wasn't in a metal tube 30,000 feet in the air. Two passengers flinched back. "Get me your corporate number. I'll ruin your career." "That's enough," the captain said, stepping back. He turned to Maria. "Secure the cabin. I'm notifying ATC." Everyone around us murmured in shock, phones recording, heads popping up. One woman whispered, "We're getting a whole new episode of Airline Nightmares live." And then, as if the universe wanted to end this scene with poetic irony, a man from row 14 stood up holding something shiny. "Is this your bag?" he called out dryly. "Because it fell on my lap 20 minutes ago when you opened every bin like a tornado." There it was, her precious crocodile handbag. Perfect, untouched, exactly where it shouldn't have been. Because she herself had knocked it out earlier. The entire plane burst into laughter, except her. Her face turned the color of overripe tomatoes. It must have, I didn't, someone. But her excuses drowned under the wave of cackling disbelief. Maria approached her one final time. "Ma'am, sit down. No more disruptions, or you will be removed when we land." For the first time since boarding, Penelope obeyed. She sank into her seat, clutching her bag like a lifeline, her face red, humiliated, trembling with indignation she could no longer express. For the rest of the flight, she didn't move, didn't speak, barely breathed. When we landed, several passengers applauded, not for the arrival, but for making it through the chaos without a diversion. As we gathered our things, Maria walked up to us and whispered, "Thank you for your patience and for not punching her. Half the plane wanted to." Then she smiled at our baby. "She's a better passenger than most adults." Mike grinned. "And her bag doesn't need a bassinet." Mariah laughed so loudly, the first-class curtains shook. As we stepped off the plane, I glanced back one last time. Penelope stood alone, defeated, her crocodile bag clutched to her chest like a relic of a battle she'd lost on every front. Her last words on the jet bridge drifted after us faintly. "I'm filing a complaint. All of this was unacceptable." Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. But something told me that, after what happened on that plane, every airline in the country would know her name, and not in the way she wanted. We didn't just win seats, we won peace. We won justice in the sky. And our daughter slept through the entire ending. The perfect finishing touch to a saga we would retell for years. A story of absurd entitlement, unexpected kindness, and one epic downfall at 30,000 feet.